Today's stream is about to start. We'll talk about code or whatever we'll talk about today. It's about to start, so please hang tight while I check that everything is okay. Sound check, camera check, lights check. How's my hair? Oh, wait, I don't have any hair. Maybe put some pants on and I am good to go. So get ready wherever you are, 'cause this stream is about to start. Get ready wherever you are, 'cause this stream is about to start. Hello, my name is Leandro Facchinetti, and let's write some code together, shall we? What we have on the menu today is one idea that hopefully will fix every problem we have been having with parameters. High stakes. So, in case you're new here, we have been working on a series of audio effects for REAPER in JSFX, and right now we are working on the auto mixer, but we will not get into the auto mixer today. We will just talk about the parameters that you control in any kind of audio effect, really. And we will try to find some patterns and abstract stuff into our library that we have also been working on. This library that lets you build audio effects, focusing primarily on the user interface part of things, hence why we are spending so much time in the parameters situation. And last week and on Tuesday this week, we have been looking at parameters, these sliders, knobs, however you want to think about them, these things that control how the effect operates. And they appear in 5 different places, 4 different places, depending on how you want to count. They appear on the user interface. You can automate. There are plenty of weird interactions between all the ways you can affect parameters. And we have been trying to find the common parts of things. And we ended up with code that looks like this. We're trying to find like the pattern behind the madness. It's kind of tricky. And I was thinking about something that bugged me. In particular, these 2 lines. So what these 2 lines do is you have your effect on a track, and then there is this param button. Currently, there are no touched effects parameters, but when you move a slider, it shows up here so that you can put it on the track envelopes or enable parameter modulation and whatnot. By the way, these are usually called sliders in JSFX, but the rest of the REAPER interface deals with the param terminology, parameters. That's what we have been calling them as well. So I guess this is a good name after all. Anyway, these 2 lines that I highlighted are the lines that are responsible for making this happen if you're not touching the JSFX slider, but one of these user interface sliders. So this slider corresponds to that one. And it shows up here instead of volume that was showing up here before. This works because of these lines. And I was bugged by this because we have to copy and paste this line anywhere we change a slider from the user interface. So if you click and drag, if you double click in all those instances, you have this call. You have to remember to put these calls there. So this is the block where we deal with click and drag. This is the place where we deal with double click. And you have to remember to put this here. If you forget, then it will not show up here, right? And of course, this and other things were simmering in the back of my head. And I came up with this simple solution for this thing. Because if you think about it, it's not the case that a parameter shows up here when you click and drag. Yes, if you click and drag, it shows up here. But this time I'm just going to click and not drag. And still, it changed to attack. So it's, and people usually, when they're teaching how these things work, they will tell you to wiggle the parameter a little. And I think that in other audio effects, it may really be necessary for you to wiggle the parameter. But if you are in JSFX using the default sliders, just by clicking, it will show up here. And the same is true of the default, the stock plugins in Reaper. So here's ReEQ. If I just, to begin with, no touched parameters. If I just click, well, I guess in this case I changed it ever so slightly, but it shows up here. But let me just try again. I will click but not drag. So you see I didn't change the gain and still it shows up here. So I was thinking, well, perhaps this should be the right behavior, right? Right now it's not like that. If I click, it goes to volume because it changed. But if I click on the other one, it's still, oh, it's in attack? Weird. Did I double click by accident? I think I double clicked by accident. Oh, no, it is changing. Huh, interesting. Oh, I guess it is changing because this block of code is running, because I have the area active. But anyway, so it is sort of working already. But I had another idea of how to implement this, which I think is better because it is, it doesn't work just by accident that this code is actually running, so it sort of works by accident. It behaves right for the right reason, not by accident, and it eliminates this repetition. And it's simple enough. We do have in the library a notion of mouse down. I thought we had a notion of mouse down. We do. It's this. So we can check. I guess it will be something like this. It is kind of cool to do this with mouse down because first, we eliminate the repetition. Second, we are doing slider automate just once, which I think is the right thing to do. There is no point in keep doing slider automate over and over. We communicate the intent of the user right when they press, and if they're going to double click, then it's fine. This event will have been triggered. If they're going to click and drag, that's fine, because this event will have been triggered. Naturally, I have to do the same logic over here because I have two sliders. So I have to take these lines out, bring these lines in, and change from attack to volume in dB. Trust me on this one, I'm heading somewhere. It's not a simple refactoring. Bo and Major here. Hello, how are you all doing? It's great to see you here. All right, so we changed the code. Let me double check that there are no other occurrences of slider automate. There are not, and I saved the file. So now when I reload the plugin, nothing on one hand, click, and there it is. Click, and there it is. All right, so things are working the same. But I would say they are more principled, and we removed repetition. Great. But I'm heading somewhere. And the place where I'm heading is the next problem. We have this notion of linked parameters. So volume is specific to this instance, but attack is linked. I will show you what I mean. I can bring in another instance of the test effect. And when I move the volume, they move independently, as most regular parameters do. But attack is linked. When I move one, the other moves as well. And yes, there is a way to link parameters explicitly here, or I guess here. But that's not what we are doing. We are not linking with the REAPER facility for linking parameters, because as far as I can tell, there is no way for us to tell REAPER that we would like for this to happen. The user would have to do this by hand, which would be super annoying. For instance, in the AutoMixer, you would add another instance of the AutoMixer because you have a new microphone in the project, and you would have to go and link every parameter. It would be super annoying. And when you have linked parameters, you can move one and the other will follow, but you cannot move the other and have one follow. It is not bidirectional. I suppose you would have to set up links back and forth for this to occur. So anyway, we are bypassing REAPER's notion of linking and we are implementing it ourselves. And that led to a whole host of problems, particularly having to do with concurrency. Let me show you what I mean. We have this function that I'm calling parameters, and I'm calling parameters in several places. Right now I'm calling parameters in 4 places. You can see that there are 5 occurrences of parameters. 1 for the definition and 4 for the calls. And it is being called on the init section, on the slider section, on the block section, and on the JSFX section. The root of the problem is that the parameters function will try to be helpful and update the graphics notion of a slider when the slider is updated, or the graphics notion of a parameter when the parameter is updated, which is what you would want, right? When you click and drag here, this number is changing, but that number should also change. And in fact, the number we print is this number. It's the slider itself. But the number you control when you click and drag is another number. And that is the number that's this variable here with the JSFX prefix. Same name as the slider name, but JSFX prefix. So this is being updated here on the parameters function because we want you to be able to link things like this and then click and drag and move the sliders just the same. But there is a race condition going on because this function is called both from the block section as well as from the JSFX section. It has to be called from the block section because this is where we check if some other instance has updated this slider so that we know we need to update this slider in our instance. This is how we receive updates for parameters. And it is called on the JSFX section because you may change the value of the parameter from the JSFX section. But there is a race condition going on. Let me see if I can reproduce the problem. I was able to make this problem happen. Yeah, it just happened now. It's very subtle though, but I made the problem happen on Tuesday many times at the end of the stream. And right now it's behaving better. And you may not be able to see this because it doesn't happen all that often. After all, it is a race condition, and by the nature of race conditions, it's hard to tell. It occurred again here at 9. By the nature of race conditions, they are hard to reproduce because they have to do with the order of execution of things and when things get interrupted. I guess since I'm not able to show this very easily, I will explain it. What happens is that you are moving the parameter on the user interface and it glitches for a split second. It goes like, for instance, from 7 to 8 back to 7 back to 8. It behaves erratically. And the reason for that is that the block section and the JSFX section run in parallel. One is dealing with processing audio, the other is dealing with rendering the user interface, and they run at the same time, perhaps on different cores of the processor or being allocated little chunks of time by some scheduler. But you can think of them as running in parallel. But they do different things. One is reading from the global memory, so the block section is reading from the global memory to get updates, while the JFX section is writing into the global memory to communicate updates. And when this thing is reading, it will change the value of this variable, which will make this block of code run, which will update the graphics notion. So maybe you are changing a parameter on the user interface. The user interface is trying to post this change at the same time that the block section is overwriting this change that you are trying to post. So your change from 7 to 8 is overwritten by the audio thread going from 8 back to 7, and then eventually you win. But that's not ideal, and especially it's not ideal that it shows up on the user interface like that. So the idea is we'll get to the idea in a moment. Mage says, I've got a JSFX writing strings into a circular buffer in Gmem and being picked up by a Lua plugin and shown in the console. Nice. And yeah, all right, Bo, see you later. Yeah, that's interesting. Are you doing this because you want to know better how the different sections of code run? Or are you doing this because you have some other program that you are trying to debug? Right. So the concept that unlocks everything is that when you press down the mouse cursor, we'll do this update. Other than that, we will let this value be wrong. Isn't that a crazy concept? These parameters, these different facets of the parameter, I will let them be out of sync. That's crazy, right? But I will let them be out of sync for a moment. Because the only purpose of this variable, we can check by reading the code that uses this variable. The only purpose of this variable is to be updated like this when you are clicking and dragging, so that you can, for instance, here I'm going to like 5.5, 5.7, and then eventually I get to 6. So there is this internal steps that happen, and that's the purpose of this variable. That's the only intent of this variable. So it would be okay for us to sync this variable right about when it will be needed. And the same for the attack slider as well. And with that, we can remove these lines from here. So again, when you click, which means you are about to do a movement, we tell REAPER that you're about to do a movement, and then we sync things again. So we take the value from the slider and we sync it to this variable. But other than that, this variable will be out of sync with this one. So if you're changing the slider by some other means, for instance, in this case, by doing this, then this variable will not represent the truth. And that's all right. I think so. Let's see if this holds water. Because I thought about all of this, but I haven't tested it. And I will go with the most complicated scenario where we have two instances. We can move the sliders independently, and this comes with. We can move these sliders, and that comes with. And then we can move this, and they all stay in sync. And I can move that, and they all stay in sync. And it also happened to fix a problem that you probably didn't see on this stream, but I could feel under my mouse. It was going up in steps that were different from when it was going down. And I guess this had to do with the parameters function resetting these variables, doing this line effectively. Now that that's no longer happening, this is behaving correctly. So I really like how this is going because we now internalized this notion in the JSFX section. It's no longer a variable that occurs in different sections. Now this variable only occurs here. See, there are no occurrences outside this block of code. Awesome. And that is behaving very well, I think. The only thing is the race condition is still there. The race condition still means that we could be trying to overwrite the global state. The global state is the thing that allows the different instances to be linked. So I'm trying to update the global state in the JSFX section, while the block section is taking me back. So could it be the case that there is a race condition still in this situation, even with the JSFX variable out of the situation? Can there still be a race condition here? I don't think so. I'm mostly worried about the scenario in which it would flicker from 6 to 7 back to 6 back to 7 kind of deal. And not only I'm not able to see this anymore, and if I cannot see it, it's probably fine. If it's a race condition that does not occur often enough and it's not a disaster when it occurs, it should be fine. But I don't think there is any chance for this race condition to even occur, because the way that we are going to do this is... Oh, hang on, there may be a race condition. Forget what I just said. The race condition would be the JSFX section runs this line, updating the slider, which updates this display, and it tries to get here to update the global notion of that parameter, but it doesn't get there in time. Meanwhile, the block section comes here, overwrites this variable, so we get to see the old value. Then the JSFX section gets to run this line, updating the global variable, and then on the next run... Oh no, it's even worse than that, isn't it? Because it has overwritten the notion of the variable that you will try to write here. So you could effectively, if you are really unlucky, you could lose that input altogether. Can I make it happen? Probably not. But theoretically, there's a problem. In practice, it seems to be fine, though. Let's see what you all have to say. Mage is just having fun making an integration between JSFX and Lua. It is a lot of fun. I need to think about atomic updates to the buffer pointers in a couple of GMEM slots. That's not ideal though. The point of atomic updates is to try and fix these race conditions that we have been dealing with. And if you try to make the updates atomic, you have to introduce some sort of locking. And that's bad, especially if you're doing this on the audio thread. So I think what you should try is to make the buffer so big that, well, I guess there are two kinds of issues. The producer, JSFX in this case, and the consumer, REAPER in this case, they can be running at different speeds, so the producer may not have enough time to produce, or the consumer may not have enough time to consume, and then the producer is overwriting data before the consumer was able to read the data. So if that's the kind of problem you are dealing with, then just increase the buffer size and hope for the best. I think that's the best strategy. That's what I'm doing in the waveform display component, because there is a race condition between the producer reading audio and the consumer, the user interface displaying the audio. But if it's not this kind of problem that you're having, if instead is the problem you're having is you're trying to write 3 things and you want these 3 writes to be considered atomic, then I recommend that you have 2 slots of 3 things and you write to one slot and then you just flick the switch just at once. So you would have 2 copies of, for instance, let's say a data structure. You have 2 copies of the data structure, you update one of these and you change the switch. And this change of switch is a single variable, so that thing is atomic. And then you write to the other one and change it back. Does that make any sense? So this way you can do all these updates without running into race conditions and without introducing locks. You could argue that this is an implementation of atomic updates, but when I hear atomic updates, I think of locks. Anyway, that's just my take on it. Honest Auntie L, hey, what's up? How close are you to finishing the auto mixer? That's a great question. I should have a roadmap. I'm gonna say the end of the year. I think I'm gonna take 2 more months to flesh out all the user interface and the details that I want to flesh out. And I probably want to add some more features like attack and release. Probably the end of the year. I'm going to have a look at atomic get and set functions. Yeah, those, as far as I understand, are locking functions. But depending on your scenario, that's the only solution. Or depending on your scenario, if you're writing from the GFX section, it doesn't really matter because the GFX section can take a lock or 2. You may drop a frame here and there, but who cares? All right, getting back to business. So there is a theoretical race condition still going on. In this theoretical race condition, you could lose user input, but it's very difficult for that to happen. And even if it does happen, the user will just see that the value they're trying to set is not the value that they see, so they will move the slider a little bit and they will be fine. So I don't care about this race condition so much anymore, now that we are doing this, which is the right thing to do. I think anyway. I think that's the right thing to do. And perhaps a quick and dirty solution for this race condition situation would be for me to update this global notion right here instead of updating it from there. But I don't like that. Or you know what? What could be cute is I could update here just the global notion instead of updating just the slider. So I update here the global notion, and it will be picked up next time we go around. That could be kind of cute. In fact, it is kind of cute because a parameter like attack in something like an auto mixer should affect all instances simultaneously. And in theory, the instance that set the attack will see that change a little faster. Just for a split second, it will see that change a little bit faster than the change can propagate to the other instances. So if instead of writing to the slider, I write to the global memory, it will be as if this change came from the outside. Just thought of this now, and I think it holds water. Yep, and I guess the corollary of this is that we don't update this variable anywhere but on this line. Isn't that a cute idea? And this is not really necessary. It is. It's still necessary. Because we may be moving the JSFX slider. For instance, via automation. So I guess the only way to go about this would be to really have something like this. We'll have to think more about this because I'm not sure I love it. And why are we setting this? We don't need that. That is taken care of by this part. What happens when I double click and drag? Yeah, my change may have broken double click and drag. Let's check that for a moment. It's already saved. Nope, double click and drag still works. I thought for a moment that because I am not updating the variable, the GFX notion of the variable here, I would be able to like double click and drag and go to 9 because it was at 8. So I would double click and drag and it would go to 9 because the internal version would still be looking at the old variable. But I think it works, so I'll take it. At this point, I'll take it. All right, let's continue with this. So there is this repetition, and I cannot think of a way to extract this if not a function. I thought long and hard about this, about all the different paths of execution, and there is really no way that I can think of. So I will call this parameters init. This is a terrible name. I'll have to revisit that. So with this change and all the others, did I break something? It's looking okay. Did you see the race condition? It happened there. Guess it's not so theoretical anymore, is it? God damn it. You know what I noticed? What's the point in calling the parameters function on the init section, like we are doing here? The slider section will always be run after the init section. Won't it? I think it will. Let's do a test effect for that. Oh, already exists. Slider 2, I guess. What was slider 1 testing? Guess it was testing the fact that the slider section is not called when you update a variable that is a slider. So I can get rid of this test. What I'm interested in now is if I have X no, I guess I can just import the library. I'll have X no init set, because that changes the behavior of the init section. And I have this in the library, so I want to have this behavior enabled. And I will want to see if the slider section is always running. And let's just have a slider. Just for the sake of it. I want a fresh project for this. And the slider section ran not only once, but twice. And anytime I change this, it is going to run again. But my next question is, if I save this project, close and reopen, will it run the slider section? I think so. Huh. It ran the slider section a whole bunch of times. I have no idea why, but anyway, I will take it. But if I close and reopen Reaper, that was too odd. No, it runs it 66 times. And now we will have run 81 times. No, 66. So it runs the slider section 66 times. Why? I have no idea, but I will take it. So what we learned from this is that we don't need to call the parameters function here because it will be called right there. And it is running in a different mode, that's true, but the mode true, which is mode read, will run this. Oh, and this will write. Maybe it is necessary after all. I'm going to rename this function. These are the parameters linked, and this is write. This is writing into the global parameters, the global namespace. We will also have a read that does the opposite. Let's see if we like the way this shapes up. Guess I will have the not initialized first because that's the first thing that happens chronologically. And with this, I can get rid of this function and paste it here. That's what I'm going for. My goal is to be able to rename this function. I know that I have been talking about parameters, and I showed here that the REAPER interface also talks about parameters, but really the intent of this function is that it will compute the derived parameters. For instance, when you are computing the volume in linear based on volume in dB. That's the intent of this function now. That and only that. And it will be smart enough to not do the derived parameters when they are not necessary. And with that, I can rename parameters to slider. And every call to the slider function does not need to pass an argument. Oh, hang on. Isn't slider a function already? I have a feeling it is. I cannot find it in the documentation, but I have this vague memory of there being a slider function. Yeah, I am right. And what this slider function does is give you the value of that slider given by that number. So let's not call it slider. It's not the best name, but Okay, looking good. Let's see what you all have to say. The block section is run first, and then the sample is called as many times as there are samples in the block. True. And I expect the slider and JSFX sections to run on a lower priority thread that gets interrupted as required. That is a good question, actually. I was talking about this with, I think it was John from Toucan Studios, this notion of the slider section running in a yet different. So there is the user interface thread, there is the audio thread, and then there is another thread, which is the slider thread. And there is a problem related to this that has to do with sample accurate automation. So if you have some sort of automation that is perhaps in changing your cutoff frequency of a filter, if I am doing the derived parameters on the sliders on the block section, I will only get updates every block, which may be a long time, and you would be able to hear something like a filter cutoff going in steps. So perhaps I should be doing this in the sample block, especially now that this function is so lean and capable of preventing work when it isn't necessary. Yeah, maybe I should be doing that. This should take care of sample accurate automation, hopefully. Just getting my head around it and thinking out loud. Yeah, sure. Same here, actually. Compute derived. Yeah. I thought about going with sliders. Let's not. Okay, a whole bunch of changes, but it's still not done, actually. Let's go over this one more time. So we have one function we can call when we want to write globally linked sliders. Another one that we can call when we want to read them. And these operations deal with the global memory, so it would be nice to condition them the same way that we condition these things. But unfortunately, I don't think it's possible because this is something that we have to consult to see if there are changes. So there is no way around that. And here, if it's not initialized, then say that it is initialized and write, otherwise read. That is necessary for when you are loading the plugin from an existing REAPER project for it to pick up the sliders the right way. So if the global memory has not been initialized, you should write to that. Fair enough. Then we have the slider derived function. Hate it, but I like the way that it reads. And here we are calling that, but we should also call write. Because if we are here, it means that the person did something like this. So we want to write that linked parameter. We don't necessarily need to do that all the time because maybe you just changed the volume, which is not linked, but you know what, it doesn't hurt. Let's do it. Then the serialized section I'm trying to avoid. The block section will not do anything right now. The slider section will read it gets really tricky to read automation on the slider section. Not here. Did I write slider instead of sample? I wrote slider instead of sample. Yeah, it's the sample section, not the slider section. Anyway, here we should read because there may be updates. And then after having read, we compute the derived. Then over here on the GFX section, I want to say that we read compute the derived. You may be wondering, why do we do this here if we are doing this there? Because the person may have the plugin bypassed. So audio is not being processed, but we would still like to see the linked parameters updating across plugin instances. Yes, so it goes like this. We first read the linked parameters, then we update stuff that may be using one of the linked parameters that we have just read. Then all of this may have changed some parameters, so we write, and then we compute the derived. And this function is cheap to call anywhere, so it's okay that I'm calling it here unconditionally. And then we do the drawing. Okay. Am I missing something? Let's see. Let's go over these step by step. The slider writes. Serialize doesn't do anything. Block doesn't do anything. Sample reads. GFX reads and writes. Complicated, but I think it is what it is. And with that, I think we nailed the life cycle of parameters. Let's put this to the test. Slider.derived is undefined. Why would that be? Line 64. What? Oh, I see. Functions that are defined in the init section are available anywhere. Functions that are defined in a particular section are only available in that section. I think that that's how it goes. Our boilerplate is around 200 lines already. This is the boilerplate. This is like the minimum thing you need to have for a plugin using the library and all the linking capabilities and whatnot. Crazy stuff. All right. So let's first tweak the global parameter, because I will load another instance now. And yes, it loads from the first instance. Great. And I can play with this. I can play with that. I can play with the other one. Let's play with automation. We'll take the first instance, click on this, go to, or maybe even better, click on this, go to param, attack is there, showing track envelope. And then we are automating this on the first track, but we should see the slider moving on the second track as well because of the linked notion. That is working. And it may even be sample accurate. Let's see what the CPU looks like, because now we are doing some work on the sample section, which is always scary. Okay, it's holding up. And I will also want to watch volume linear to prove that this is being computed in real time here. That's scary. Why is volume linear not updating? Not even when I do it like this. Oh, this is kind of cute. It is behaving like it should actually. I am on track 2, but there is automation on track 1 that prevents this slider from changing. It really is linked. Awesome. What is not awesome is that this volume linear doesn't seem to be recomputed. This line doesn't seem to be running. Let's watch volume dB as well. And volume dB and volume dB previews are out of sync. Oh, I'm looking at volume, but I'm automating attack. Come on, let's do it. Let's do it, Leandro. From milliseconds to samples. That's the value that should be changing. Come on. Yeah, there you go. It is changing. All right. So now we have 9. We have 9 milliseconds. I will save the project, reopen the project, and we should see 9. Which is this saving and restoring problem is what started this whole journey, by the way. And it is 9. Well, perhaps you got a hand here from the automation. So let's just repeat this exercise. But this time, let's not have any automation going. And if that works, then I really will declare this functional. This time it's H. And there you have it. The parameters are linked. We nailed the life cycle of JSFX sliders and all their facets. The only wrinkle is that race condition. Perhaps there's something we can do about it, but yeah, the problem being we would like for this line write to always occur before this line read. Well, I guess we solved the race condition by brute force here. In fact, when you're doing it like this, you don't even need this line. even this brute force solution here, it alleviates the race condition, but it doesn't eliminate the race condition. And it is really tricky as to why that is the case. But check this out. On the JSFX section, we are writing some value there. And on the sample section, we are reading. So it could be the case that the sample section runs this, reads a value, and pauses. Then the JSFX section comes and writes this and pauses. Then this, on the sample section, finishes running, but with an old value. So this overwrites this to the old value. But then we are about to write the new value, so that's fine. Okay, so I guess the worst case scenario is the sample section reads this. JSFX runs this whole line. Then sample section continues with the stale value and overwrites this. Ugh, parallel programming is hell. You know what I'm gonna do? This is not really a proper solution, and it does not read nice. So I'll get rid of it. And I will keep this, because essentially it is the same. It is doing that. Now the race condition has more space to occur, but since we are not eliminating it, what's the point anyway, right? And what about that other solution in which we didn't even do this? Does that help anything? In this case, the sample section comes here, reads a stale value. We overwrite the global variable. That's okay. It's not going to affect our slider yet. Then we try to write. But then the sample section had time to come here and overwrite attack MS with the old value, so we end up writing the wrong value. Again, we write the right value, and then we write the wrong value. Well, but I guess there wouldn't be a call to this. There would not be a call to that. So this time, the sample section reads the old value. The JSFX section writes the new value. The sample section writes the old value, but that's all right, because the next time around, well, someone will call write. Who calls write? The init section, but that's over. And the slider section. That could have the power of overwriting our variable. Well, if you have some automation going on, that could happen. So I guess the solution for that would be to make this conditional, this write conditional as well. So on the slider section, we don't write. The slider section doesn't write. It only calls the derived. And the derived would write. That is going to lead to problems too. Because we could be writing with the old value here. We could be computing this with the old value. God damn it, this problem is too complicated. I will have to think more about this. There is no way I can finish this today. Let's see the changes I have and see if I want to commit to any of them. Yeah, I don't think I want to commit to any of this, but I will have to leave myself a to-do here. I will come up with something. Probably another layer of indirection. That always solves everything. Or maybe I am running into like one of those fundamental problems of concurrency and one of the fundamental problems of concurrent programming, and I just don't realize it yet. Could happen. Concurrent programming is so complicated. Anyway, we made some progress here. We extracted this notion, which is fine. We extracted that notion, which is also okay. We really nailed this. Saving and restoring the project is working. This looks okay to me. I think that this helps. Sample accurate automation. I don't really have a way of testing this very well. I don't know how sample accurate automation could be tested easily. I will not bother with that. And this is the key concept that I really, really like. And this is redundant. I think I removed that before in the other slider. I want to test this one last time. Just make sure that removing this still makes everything work, especially the click and double drag situation. Click and double drag. Double click and drag. God damn it. So I am at 7. I double click and drag. Now the thing occurs. Where you double click and it snaps back. So this line was necessary after all. And this one was perhaps working because of gmem somehow. And with that, can I double click and drag? Yeah, which is even nicer than req. On this one, you double click to disable, but if you are disabled and you double click and drag, it doesn't go with the mouse. You have to double click and then you have to drag. You have to release and then drag. It's a kind of annoying. Anyway, I think we nailed this. So let's wrap up. Honest Auntie L is asking, can this be used as a VST plugin outside of Reaper, or is there stuff that's Reaper specific? I am making a point of not making anything Reaper specific in the Automixer. Before, in my previous version of the Automixer, it was relying on Reaper's advanced routing capabilities, but this time it's not. So in theory, it can be used in other DAWs using something like that, which is a project that runs JSFX in other DAWs. So in theory, it can be used like that. In practice, I haven't tested. But I also have a plan of porting my JSFX into C++ to use as a VST in other DAWs. In fact, we had a meeting about this on Wednesday, so 2 days ago, the C++ digital signal processing juice study group, my project in that study group is to do that. It's kind of paused because I'm working on the JSFX version, but I will translate that to C++ to be used in any DAW. What happens if you automate multiple instances or look at envelope on 2 instances? Yeah, so you would have a globally synced parameter, a linked parameter, and you automate both of them in different plugins, in different instances. All hell breaks loose at that point. Just don't do that. Woohoo! Yeah, we fixed some problems. Can JSFX even pause mid-statement? Probably. I haven't tested, but we sort of saw some glitches that could only be explained by that. And that's usually how things work. So this line, for instance, gets translated to assembly as a bunch of instructions: read, assign, write. So yeah, in between any 2 assembly instructions, you could be paused. I don't think there is any kind of guarantee with respect to that. There's no kind of guarantee that this will occur atomically before that occurs. I mean, we're talking about lines that are completely unrelated, running on different threads. There is very little guarantee. Mage says, I'm sure the audio thread won't get interrupted by the user interface. That would be a nightmare. True. Or vice versa. I don't think that one interrupts the other. Anyway, could you do a long loop in GFX and see if you get an audio glitch? Yeah, that does not happen. That does not happen. I had some plugins that did crazy stuff on the GFX section. You could see them lagging visibly, and the stream could see that lagging, but the audio was okay. Until, of course, the whole CPU starts to fail because it's overworking. Anyway, I think that answers the question. Something that we have done incidentally, not on purpose, but we have done something like that. There is no kind of interruption like that. But anyway, concurrency is complicated. We'll deal with this perhaps on Monday. I don't know. We'll see. But we'll be back to work more next week, probably on Monday. And we'll probably work on this problem unless I find something else that I think is worth pivoting to. For the time being, thank you to Mage, Honest Auntie Tail, Honest Auntie Ale, L, sorry, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing this right, and Bo for joining me here on the chat. Thank you to everyone else who is watching this, and have a great weekend. I see you probably on Monday for more of this. Enjoy. Oh, M9 is also here, so thanks for being here. All right, bye. Thank you for watching the stream, you know how great it has been. Or maybe it sucked, and I am glad that you stuck with me. And soon we'll be back together for some more coding or talking or chilling. The next time I'll be streaming.